You may think that you're using your glutes when you're running, cycling, walking around in your day-to-day life, but actually 80% of our clients don't have good glute activation when they come to our clinic with things like knee pain, calf pain, and tight hamstrings. In this video, I'm going to show you 3 easy tests that you can do on yourself to get a sense of whether or not your glutes are activating and how much. Hi, I'm Catherine. I'm a sport and remedial massage therapist and the founder of Layton Sports Massage. In these videos, I want to help you feel better and move better in your day-to-day life with simple self-care tips and information about your body. So today, I want to tell you 3 ways that you can test to see if your glutes are activating. So why is this so important? If you're doing all the glute strengthening exercises like squats and lunges and glute bridges, walking, running, or cycling, but you're not actually activating your glutes, you're not going to strengthen your glutes. And in fact, all of your other muscles will compensate. So the first step, if you have any of the problems that were mentioned in the last video about the problems that can be created if you don't have good glute activation, is to test and see, are your glutes working? Are they activating? Is your brain recruiting them? Now, if you haven't watched the last video, which is what is glute activation and what problems can it cause, or can a lack of glute activation cause, go ahead and pause it and watch it. I've linked it in the description below, or you can watch this through the end and then go back and watch that when you have time. Now, the first way that we're going to test if your glutes are activating or not is bending your knees. Yes, it's really that simple. So one of the jobs of the glutes is to stabilize the head of the femur, which is your thigh bone, in your pelvis, in your hips. Now, if you're not sure what the glutes are, they're the muscle at the back of your hips. They basically make up your butt. So they go from the base of the spine, which is like a V, and then they go out around to the side of your thighs, the top of your thighs, the hips. What's supposed to happen when you bend your knees is that your glutes contract and keep your thigh bones lined up straight. But if your glutes aren't contracting, the knees will usually fall in. So if you stand hip width apart with your feet hip width apart, and you can do this in front of a mirror or just on your own, and without looking at your knees, bend your knees forward. Now, this isn't a squat, so you don't need to worry about sitting back in good squatting position. But just let your knees bend forward and then look down and see where they land. Do they go a little bit in? If they go in a little bit, that's a good indication that you have a glute activation problem. You want to look at the alignment of the knee with the foot, and if it's inside the foot, then you probably need to activate on that side. Now, in some cases, you will have other muscles that are actually compensating for your glutes not kicking in, and your knees might not fall in at all because other things are tensioning to keep you in alignment. If your knees aren't falling in, it doesn't necessarily mean that your glutes are active, but if your knees are falling in, it's probably a sign that you need to work on your glute activation. Number 2 is the knee lift test. So it's basically what it sounds like. Stand hip with your feet hip width apart and lift one knee. So in this case, it's the standing leg that the glute should be working on. If you lift one knee, what should happen is that your glute kicks in to help stabilize your pelvis along with your pelvic floor and your lower abdominals. And we will be talking about activating your lower abdominals in another video. If you lift one knee and you're really wobbly, that's a sign that your glutes are not kicking in when you're lifting your knee. So that means it's not kicking in when you're running, or when you're walking, or when you're going up and down stairs. Now, sometimes you can lift a knee and you actually are pretty stable the first time. But if you do it a second and a third time, you get a little bit more wobbly, like a little bit more all over the place. If that happens to you, what that means is that you have enough glute activation or connection that you can hold it one time, but then when you start to repeat the movement, your glutes stop activating or being recruited. So if you try this, number 1 or number 2, let me know in the comments how you go. Do your knees fall in when you do the bent knee test? Or when you're lifting your knee, are you wobbly? Fun fact, I guess fun for me, a lot of times clients come in and they tell us that they have weak ankles, and they think they have weak ankles because when they lift their knee, their ankle gets really wobbly. And actually, the ankle is wobbling because your glutes aren't kicking in, because you don't have good pelvic stability. So because you don't have good pelvic stability, your hips kind of sway around, and then your ankle's having to try and compensate to stabilize you. And that's not really your ankle's job. Your stability should be coming from your pelvis. So if you do the knee lift test and you're wobbling around, don't think, my ankle's really, really wobbly. Think, oh, my glutes probably aren't activating. Test number 3, the touch test. Now, the thing about test number 2 is that even though this is harder to cheat, especially if you do it a couple of times, it's still possible that your body has developed compensation mechanisms that you can lift a knee and not wobble even though your glute's not active. Or some of your glute will contract, but not all of it. So with this last test, you literally can't go wrong. There's no way to fake this one. You just take your hand and you put it on your butt. And then with your hand on your butt, you try to contract your muscle with your brain. If you're not sure what I mean when I say contract the muscle, I'm going to use the bicep as an example because it's a really easy one. I think we've all seen those shows, like those cartoons where there's like some meathead muscly guy who goes, "The pool is that way," and then his bicep pops up. So when he does that, he's contracting his bicep. It goes from being soft, and then when you contract it, to being hard. So that's what you should feel under your hands. So if you put your hand on your glute and you try to contract your glute, it's kind of like you're squeezing your butt cheeks with your brain, right? All the muscles should get hard. It should go from being soft to being hard. Now, if you have a little bit of extra padding on your backside, which many of us do, just push a little bit through that so that you get in contact with the muscle. But if you're touching your glutes and you're not feeling anything and you're trying really hard to connect with them, you may not be able to activate your glutes. And it's actually more common than you'd think. We have a lot of clients who come in and they have a really, really hard time connecting with their glutes because they've just been switched off for so long. There's 2 things to this. Number 1, do your glutes contract at all, right? Can you get a contraction? And if you can, that is fantastic. The next question is, how much of your glute is contracting? The glute is quite a large muscle. It takes up a lot of surface area. So you want to check, is like the upper part of the glute contracting more, or is it the outside, or is it the back? So kind of try and touch it in a few different places and see if you feel the glute contracting. Feel how it contracts. Now, obviously, this is probably not something that you want to be doing in public. So feel free to wait until you're home to try this if you are around people right now. But the main thing is you want to get a sense of, are my glutes contracting? Is all of my glutes contracting? And is one side contracting better than the other? If you are doing this and you notice that one side of your glutes is not contracting as well as the other, I would challenge you to think, does this link with any problems that I have? So like if your glutes are contracting on one side and they're not contracting as well on the other, is the side that it's not contracting on, do you have tight hamstrings on that side, or tighter hip flexors, or calf problems, or Achilles problems? Because very often they're linked, as we talked about in the last video. So now if you do the touch test, let me know in the comments, can you feel anything? Is your muscle contracting, or is a certain area of your muscle contracting and not others, or are you getting no connection at all? It's also worth noticing, can you contract your glutes without contracting your hamstrings, without contracting your thighs, or squeezing something else? It's okay if you're squeezing your abdominals, that's totally fine. They tend to be linked to each other, but ideally you want to be able to contract your glutes without contracting your hamstring, because we don't want those to necessarily be linked to each other. I would love to know in the comments below, if you try any of these, what you find, and also if you have a link, if you've got a problem on one side, and at the same time that you have a problem, that's the side where you're having trouble getting as much glute activation. Now, if this is something that you would like to learn more about and you're in London, we run a glute activation workshop at the time of recording, our next one is the 10th of November. But if you're watching this after the 10th of November, 2019, you can also check out our workshop page, and I'll link it below in the description comments so that you can see when we have another one coming up. We usually do them a couple of times a year. And if you subscribe to my channel, our channel, I'm doing a series about activation, and one of the scheduled videos going forward is how to activate your glutes in your day-to-day life with no extra time. And so we'll be talking about how you can think about activating your glutes as you go about your day without having to find extra time for it, for exercises or additional training. So if you'd like to join the workshop, I'll put the link to register below if you're in London. And of course, if you want to know more about this or any other self-care tips, please do subscribe to our channel.